Hello, welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and in this brief video, I just wanted to talk to you about two paternalistic discourses of pedagogy. And the reason I decided to record this was because in my lectures on Paulo Freire, the lecture 2 to chapter 2, part 2, I had mentioned briefly about Mark Bracher and his reading and writing about pedagogy, and especially how he explains through psychoanalysis and studies of consciousness the different paternalistic and also destructive approaches to teaching. And I thought I should add a little bit to that lecture by creating a standalone video lecture about what I meant. Now, do keep in mind that I have a full-length webinar on Mark Bracher's book, Radical Pedagogy, and you can always watch it if you have time. But here, just two paternalistic discourses or practices of pedagogy, which he terms the discourse of the master and the discourse of the discipline. Now, the discourse of the master is the one that comes very close to what Freire calls the banking system of education, because what Bracher means by the discourse of the master is that it's a method of teaching in which the teacher assumes this masterly role of being the role model, which the students are supposed to emulate, but also as the source of all knowledge. And hence, in the process of teaching, in the practice of pedagogy, the role of the professor is not just a dispenser of knowledge, but also someone who is an authority on it and whose views are final. And in that process, then students who can reproduce the teacher's politics, the teacher's preferences, the teacher's way of doing things are considered successful, and the students who cannot replicate the master's strategies and ways of doing things fail. Now, for Bracher, this mode of teaching is destructive because what it does is it forces the student's identity into crisis, right? If they cannot match the requirement of the professor, or if they have a difference of opinion, then as a result, to protect their own identities, because that's what we all humans tend to do, they will withdraw or become self-destructive or become disruptive. So overall, anytime we employ the discourse of the master in a classroom setting, it ends up harming our students' learning. The discourse of the university or the discourse of the institution or discipline is when we only teach what we consider is part of a certain discipline, part of a certain field of study. The emphasis then is mostly on learning whatever is permissible or is included in a certain discipline, and students can just learn the basics of that and assume that they are educated. In the process, they do not really develop any ideas beyond the university or beyond the discipline and only learn to function within that, hence developing no critical thought, no critical way of looking at the system itself. So the discourse of the discipline in teaching then ends up teaching the system in which we exist, which would also form another form of banking system of education. You can see a great example of that in humanities departments, in literature departments, where what we prefer to read, write about, or teach is always connected to what we specialize in. And we feel good about ourselves and we feel we have accomplished a lot if we master the basic discourse of that subfield or the field. The role of radical pedagogy for Mark Bracher is to go beyond that, right? To deliver the kind of pedagogy that actually enhances students' identities and then makes them into empathetic human beings in the world. Now, do keep in mind that I'm really barely gleaning these ideas from the major work of Mark Bracher, which is called Radical Pedagogy. I'll post a link to the book in the description. And the reason I decided to do this brief lecture on Bracher's work is because since we are doing lectures and conversations on Paulo Freire, I mean, of course, Freire was the beginning, right? A lot has happened in critical pedagogy and it has gone into different areas with the same purpose of enabling more critically aware students with stable social identities. And I think Mark Bracher's work could really enhance your understanding of pedagogy, not just theoretically, but also in questioning your own practices in the classroom and in realizing that so many things that we assume to be right and correct can actually be deeply harmful and destructive to our students. So these are some of my thoughts on two discourses of paternalistic pedagogy, the discourse of the master and the discourse of the discipline or discourse of the university, as explained by Mark Bracher in his book Radical Pedagogy. If you have any questions, of course, please feel free to send them my way. I'm always happy to address your questions and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And if you also have a few moments, please do watch my series on Paulo Freire. It will come up towards the end of this video. Just click on it and give it some time. It might benefit you. It might also benefit your practice of teaching, but also maybe your scholarship and your own understanding of what does it take to be a more effective teacher in this world. So that is all I have to say. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will come back to you with something new or something in the series on Paulo Freire next time. Until then, thank you so much, and peace and love.